All right, superstar Kiccha Sudeep now wades into the language war debate. In fact, India Today has spoken with Kiccha Sudeep in an exclusive interview, quite an explosive interview there. After Ajay Devgn's taunting tweet, Kiccha Sudeep now hits back. Sudeep asks Devgn, and I quote, "I understand the text you sent to me in Hindi because we've all respected, loved and learned Hindi, no offense sir, but was wondering what would the situation be if my response was typed in Kannada? Don't we too belong to India, sir?" This is almost an explosive retort to Ajay Devgn. Ajay Devgn, in fact, tried to step into the language controversy, the language war or language debate, asking if Hindi is not the unifying national language, then why do South Indian stars dub South Indian cinema in the Hindi language? Now, in response to that, here is Kiccha Sudeep giving out quite an explosive response. And Kiccha Sudeep says, and I quote, "I understand the text you sent to me in Hindi because we all respect, loved and learned the language Hindi. No offense, sir, but was wondering what would the situation be if my response to you was typed in Kannada? Don't we all belong to India, sir?" Ideally indicating, should not Ajay Devgn also know Kannada language just like he knows Hindi? Let me quickly cut across to our reporter joining us, Likita Sri, joining us from Bengaluru, who's spoken to Kiccha Sudeep on that. Likita, knowing Kiccha Sudeep, he can take some really sharp jibes, and whoever be it, Kiccha Sudeep never minces his words, and that's what we see here. Soon as Ajay Devgn gave out quite a sentimental response on how Hindi is indeed a unifying language, Kiccha Sudeep, who's been constantly, he's been fighting for the Kannada language all along, was almost a very sensitive point that Ajay Devgn touched, and we see how Kiccha has exploded.
Yeah, Nabila, actually, we got an interview of Kiccha Sudeep. In that time, I asked a question about Pan-India, because Pan-India is trending nowadays and every Kannada movie is dubbed for Hindi, Telugu, Tamil and all other languages. For that question, he explained this thing, and he says that Hindi is no more a national language. So why are you using the word of Pan-India? So there is no word like a Pan-India. We are dubbing our movies in different languages, in Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, as it is. So there is no word like Pan-India. If Hindi movie is dubbing to Kannada, then we won't call Hindi movie as a Pan-India movie. Only for Kannada language, why we are using for Pan-India? In that context, he said, Pan-India is not a word. We can't use Pan-India. For that, he said, Hindi is no more a national language. So it was completely a different context. He said, with due respect,
I'm telling you. What Kiccha Sudeep said right now is very interesting. Kiccha says that if you typed in Hindi, I will understand, I will read it because I respect and I have learned Hindi, only because we respect Hindi as a language. But the same thing, if I had written in Kannada, would you have understood it? Almost indicating that if I can learn your language Hindi, why can't you learn my language Kannada? If equal, then all languages should be equal. How can one be superior to the other? Kiccha Sudeep earlier spoke to Karnataka Tak. Here's what he said in response to Ajay Devgn.
Hindi is no more national language. So which is the national language today? Which is the national language?
No national language.
Correct? So what is Pan-India? Just because ನಾವು ಕನ್ನಡ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಆ ಟರ್ಮ್ ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕಾ ಪ್ಯಾನ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು? ಅರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಿನಿಮಾ ನಾವು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆ ಬಿಡ್ತೀವಿ, ನೋಡೋದು ಬಿಡೋದು ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದು, ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಡೋದು ಮಾತ್ರ ನಾವಿರೋದು. So because we come from South India, they've started terming us Pan-India, Pan-India, Pan-India. Why isn't Hindi being said as Pan-India? ಅವರು ಇವತ್ತು ತೆಲುಗು, ತಮಿಳು, ಮಲಯಾಳಂ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆನೂ ಅವರು ಡಬ್ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಓಡ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮಾಡಿ ಡಬ್ ಆಗಿರೋದು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. So which is having a better reaction from the audiences today? ಇವತ್ತು ನೀವು ಪುಷ್ಪ ತಗೊಳ್ಳಿ, ನೀವು KGF ತಗೊಳ್ಳಿ, ನಾನು ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ಇವರೆಲ್ಲ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಟ್ಟರು, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಗೆದ್ರು.
All right, that's Kiccha Sudeep almost taking a sharp jibe at Ajay Devgn, almost saying that, one seeing in the recent past, the recent trend shows very well that South Indian films dubbed in Hindi is doing far better than the Hindi movies themselves in the Hindi belt. This is Kiccha Sudeep speaking in Kannada, while he almost takes a sharp jibe at Ajay Devgn, saying that if you look at recent history, recent South Indian films are breaking shattering records world over, far better and far more revenue generating in compared to any Hindi film in the recent past. This is Kiccha Sudeep almost reacting in kind and measure to what Ajay Devgn has said. Remember, Ajay Devgn in quite a strong way of reacting to the language war or the language debate said that Hindi will and always be our mother tongue. And Hindi is a unifying language. If Hindi wasn't the unifying national language, then why would you dub your South Indian movies in Hindi? To that, here's Kiccha Sudeep, who's responded saying that one knows very well in the recent past whose films do better. It's the South Indian films that do far better in the Hindi belt or the Hindi region. Let me cut across to our reporter, Likita. Likita, you know, Kiccha Sudeep now has also, not just responded to you, but now come back with another stronger reply saying, we know Hindi, we speak Hindi, we write Hindi. Do you know Kannada? If I had to write this in Kannada, would you have understood it? This is Kiccha Sudeep. No surprises.
Yeah, actually in the interview also he said that we have a marketing space for multiple languages and we are doing good also. That's why we are dubbing the films and we are getting good marketing space. So that is the trend now. It's nowhere that pan-India, that you can't use the word of pan-India. So that is what he said in interview. And in the tweet also he mentioned that I can read Hindi, I can understand Hindi. If I reply to you in Kannada words.
All right, the language war is really becoming a lot more interesting. We're looking at Ajay Devgn now responding. Ajay Devgn has reacted on Twitter and he says, I quote, Kiccha Sudeep, you are a friend. Thanks for clearing up the misunderstanding. I've always thought of the film industry as one. We respect all languages and we expect everyone to respect our language as well. Perhaps something was lost in translation. Here is Ajay Devgn almost coming down to the level of what Kiccha Sudeep says. In fact, it was Kiccha Sudeep first who says that we respect Hindi language and we have learnt it. We know how to write and read it. To that, here is Ajay Devgn, who quickly responded on Twitter, not wasting any time. Remember, these are two superstars. One star of the South, a superstar of the South. Kiccha Sudeep has a huge fan following, not just in the South, but across of India. In fact, he was also part of Salman Khan's movie Devgn recently. And Kiccha Sudeep really has quite a following across the country. So does Ajay Devgn. Ajay Devgn's several films are remakes of South Indian movies. And here are two superstars, one from the North and one from the South, almost clashing on language. What should be the unifying national language? Here is Ajay Devgn, who's responded to Kiccha Sudeep, and he says, and I quote, right now as he speaks on Twitter, he puts out this message saying, you are a friend, Kiccha Sudeep. Thanks for clearing up the misunderstanding. I've always thought of the film industry as one. We respect all languages and we expect everyone to respect our language as well. Perhaps something was lost in translation. Not too sure what was lost in translation. Clearly, one thing is for sure, that Ajay Devgn has stood up to the Hindi language, stood up for the Hindi language, saying that Hindi is indeed our mother tongue. It is our language, our mother tongue. It is a unifying national language, and we must respect it. More or less, standing up for the clamour to make Hindi the national language, a unifying language, to which Kiccha Sudeep has strongly refuted. And now Ajay Devgn comes back to say, well, all is well. We must respect one another. Likita, Ajay Devgn now coming down to respond to Kiccha Sudeep, not wasting any time, barely in 10 minutes. Ajay Devgn responding, saying, well, all good, bro, almost in colloquial terms, we are friends, all is well, let's respect one another. That's what it's come down to, and that's what we expected to be from the start.
Yeah, and at the same time, one more interesting thing is in the same interview, Kiccha Sudeep has told, I have a dream project, like I want to act with the Kajal. So I have that dream from my early days, he said. So maybe, and also he said, I have respect for each other languages, and I love my mother tongue. And at the same time, I have respect with all languages, he said.
I mean, that's very interesting because clearly we know that Kiccha Sudeep has quite a following, even in Bollywood. Undoubtedly, he wants to work with Kajol, Ajay Devgn's wife, who's also a superstar in Bollywood. Clearly, we're looking at both the stars now trying to come eye to eye on the language war and also trying to settle this animosity quickly, turning around in a Twitter message that Ajay Devgn has almost tried to calm the situation by saying we respect one another.